The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting NORML.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, tokers and tokettes. It is Wednesday, July 14th, 2010, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us for the next 60 minutes of news, talk, interviews, information, music, comedy, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. Coming to you live from Rolla J Studios in beautiful Portland, Oregon, where it's not a typo, it's a way of life, and home to the 2010 National NORML Conference, September 9th through 11th at the Governor Hotel. We'll be giving you all the details on that in the coming weeks. Also joining us from our virtual studio in beautiful Astoria, Oregon, my good friend and half-half sister, Cannabis Carrie.
Hello, and it is beautiful today in beautiful Astoria, Oregon.
Oh, it's beautiful, and your levels are a little distorted, so bring them down just a little bit, sister.
Okay, how's that?
Much better. So we're having a good day here in beautiful Portland. Beautiful Astoria are having a good day as well. And also good news, good day news here for us for NORML Show Live. You love him, you know him, you can't get enough of him. Ganja John, he's not back, but he is through with surgery. He did a surgery today. It was successful surgery to remove his left eye, his blind left eye, and he is thrilled. He's excited. We got some phone calls from him here at the studio. Carrie, did you manage to get in touch with John by any chance?
We talked on email last night, late in the middle of the night, and he said they were going to issue him a really cool pirate eye patch. Arg.
Arg. Yeah, we're going to have a special pirate party for John over at his place with his wife and friends and everybody, so that should be a lot of fun. Now, Carrie brings us our news headlines right after our first break. So, Carrie, what is in the news headlines today?
Oh, I'm so excited. I've been holding this story back in the hopper. I've got an Irie Wednesday story for you today. Also, we've talked about it a little bit on Monday, but we're going to talk about the state of Oregon, who's now allowing out-of-staters to come and check out our medical marijuana program. And we're going to go to a county in California where, unfortunately, the cops get paid to go after pot smokers.
Oh, boy. Well, there's always good news and bad news when we take a look at the headlines. Thanks, Carrie. We'll be right back with you after this first break. Now, also today, we have our Daily Toker Tunes. It is Irie Wednesday, as Carrie mentioned, so Johnny Reeferseed will be joining us from Iowa to bring us the latest reggae tune. This is a song from the Fellows that we'll be playing called On Trial today. And as everybody knows, on our Wednesdays, we always visit with Dr. Mitch Earlywine for our Cannabis Science segment. Dr. Mitch is a published author with Understanding Marijuana, Parent's Guide to Marijuana, and one of the leading researchers in the nation and probably the world when it comes to marijuana and alcohol research. If you've got a question about the history, the science, the medicine behind cannabis, Dr. Mitch is the guy that can answer it. Get into our chat room. We'll take your questions live through chat. And at the end of the show, a little bit radical rant on I Got's Mine, the dispensary owners who are fighting against marijuana legalization in California. It's unbelievable. Radical Russ, we'll be right back here after
You're
this.
listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Georgia,
Hi, this is Willie Nelson, and I need your help. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 20s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stop arresting law-abiding citizens because they prefer marijuana over alcohol. Nearly 2,000 Americans are arrested every day on marijuana charges. We're unfairly destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of people each year simply because they smoke marijuana. These are not criminals. They're average citizens like you, good neighbors who work hard, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to their communities. We need your help to end marijuana prohibition once and for all. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's Normal News with Cannabis Carrie.
And here's our story for Irie Wednesday. Bob Marley's son, Ziggy Marley, is releasing a new comic book featuring a superhero from a planet that is in desperate need of marijuana. The Adventures of Marijuana Man follows the hero as he seeks to save Earth's marijuana fields from destruction by the evil drug company Pharmaxon. He hopes of saving his home planet in the process. Now, the first issue of Ziggy Marley's Marijuana Man comic book will hit shelves across the country on April 20th of 2011. But to promote the comic, he will be making a one-day appearance this month to promote the upcoming series at this year's Comic-Con next week in San Diego. The cover art for the first issue will be available at Comic-Con in poster form, and Ziggy will be on hand to sign the posters with artist Jim Mofford on Saturday, July 24th. Ziggy says of his new endeavor that he has been a fan of comic books since he was a young boy growing up in Jamaica. Well, other than being the oldest son of legend reggae icon Bob Marley and his wife Rita, Ziggy is a musical master in his own right, winning 5 Grammys. His last Grammy wasn't even in the reggae category, but for Best Musical Album for Children. He won that earlier this year for his CD, Family Time. So we're really looking forward to The Adventures of Marijuana Man. I've seen the cover art, and it is awesome.
Well, that's good to hear. You know, we better than Blunt Man and Chronic, I suppose. There's a lot of good stuff out there that's put out in a comic book form, though. I encourage anyone to check out a comic that was called A Drug War Carol. It's kind of done in the style of the old Christmas Carol, you know, with the 3 ghosts that visit and all that, but it's to a prohibitionist, and it's a really cute comic. I think there's a lot that can be done with those, and I thank Ziggy Marley for getting involved with this and putting his stamp on this new way of getting the information out to people.
The green state of Oregon will now allow any qualifying U.S. patients to obtain an Oregon medical marijuana card. The Oregon medical marijuana program had required an Oregon residency as part of the medical marijuana card application process, and they had to supply proof of residency before they would be issued an Oregon card. The change came about in the form of the Oregon Attorney General issuing a statement back on June 14th after reviewing the case of the state versus Behringer. In that case, the Oregon Court of Appeals held that Oregon was not required to give a California patient status as a patient full faith and credit, and that the California patient's federal constitutional right to travel did not protect them from being prosecuted and convicted under Oregon law. Well, that being said, the court also concluded that the application requirements of the law was ambiguous and could resolve that ambiguity by concluding that the law could permit out-of-state patients to register with the state. Patients from the other states would still have to have written documentation from a licensed Oregon physician, and they will have to designate an Oregon location as their grow site, whether they have one or not. Now, this protection for medical marijuana patients, whether they live in Oregon or not, does not extend beyond Oregon's borders.
Yep, that's right. This is really exciting news, and particularly here in Portland, Oregon, because we're right on the Columbia River. I'm thinking the Willamette, the Columbia, there's so many. But right across the river is Vancouver, Washington. And I used to work with Oregon NORML in 2005 and 2006, and we put on these medical marijuana cardholder meetings, and all these people from Vancouver who need the help would come to us and say, can we get in your meetings? And we're like, no, you have to have an Oregon medical marijuana card. And they say, well, how do we get one? We said, well, you can't because you're not an Oregon resident. Well, that's changed now. Now those people in Vancouver, Washington, Battleground, all these places that border Oregon, not just to the north, but also we could look over to Idaho. People living in Payette, Fruitland, Idaho, near the Oregon border, could now register and get medical marijuana cards. Now, it's important to understand that if in the situation of Idaho, your Oregon medical marijuana card wouldn't help you a bit in Idaho. You'd still be busted in Idaho, and anything over 3 ounces, you'd be a felon, and you could be looking at some serious jail time. But you could at least go across the border into Oregon to your grow site to visit. If this dispensary language makes it on the ballot and dispensaries pass, you could go across the state to the dispensary with your Oregon card. And also understand the Oregon card wouldn't help you in other medical marijuana states like Washington or California. You'd still have to get your recommendations in Washington and in California. But for those people that travel a lot between the states, between Oregon and Washington, this is fantastic news. And also, I've been hearing from folks in other areas of the country who had a very interesting point on this. One of our listeners lives in Ohio, and she was pointing out that, well, I live in Ohio, couldn't I still get an Oregon medical marijuana card? We're like, yeah, sure. It doesn't matter where you live. You can live in France. You can live in, the North Pole. It doesn't matter. You can get your Oregon medical marijuana card so long as you see an Oregon doctor and you put down an Oregon grow site, right? Those are the two requirements. Those things have to be in Oregon, the doctor and the grow. You don't. You can live anywhere. So she goes, well, great. I live in Ohio. I could get my Oregon medical marijuana card and then go up to Michigan. And Michigan is one of the 3 states, Michigan, Montana, and Rhode Island, that recognize any state's medical marijuana card. Get my drift here? Take that Oregon card and go into Michigan and be legal while you're running around in Michigan. That's a system called reciprocity, where any card will do, right? That's not what we have in Oregon now. Your California card does not work. Your Washington card, if you can get a card in Washington, it does not work. No state works in Oregon but Oregon. But the main point is that now anybody can get that card and be legal in the state of Oregon.
In Shasta County, California, Sheriff Tom Basenko is under pressure in the weak economy and has had to lay off staff, reduce patrols, and his department has been releasing jail inmates to cut costs. According to the Wall Street Journal, the one thing he is focused on now is marijuana busts. He says that if he steps up his pursuit of marijuana growers, his department is eligible for over $500,000 a year in anti-drug funding. He hopes his focus on marijuana growers will save jobs in his small department. The majority of the funding from the feds would have to be spent fighting marijuana. He admits that marijuana may not be the county's most pressing crime problem, but he says that that is where the money is. Even though residents in the Northern California region overwhelmingly take a benign view of cannabis and the cannabis growers, federal dollars are keeping his department to focus on it. To make sure that his office gets the federal funds to keep running, Basenko spends much of his department's shrinking resources to send teams out to hike in the woods looking for illegal grow operations. He says that infractions like drunk driving and robbery have a bigger impact on local residents than marijuana growing in the forest, but the $340,000 in funds that he gets covers 3 officer salaries and benefits plus updated equipment. Nationally, the U.S. Department of Justice spends nearly $3.6 billion a year to augment budgets of state and local law enforcement agencies. The White House spends another $239 million to fund local drug trafficking task forces, and the federal government sets aside $4 billion for economic stimulus packages for law enforcement grants. For smaller departments like Sheriff Basenko's, the money is just too enticing to pass up.
What an amazing perverse incentive that we set up here, right? Because normally you'd think if crime were down and you needed less cops, that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? We'd be living in a more safe community, a safer society. But no, the attitude here seems to be that we need to make up crime. We need to find crime so we can keep all these cops employed. That's basically what this federal, these grants to go after marijuana users are. They're a jobs program. They're a jobs program for cops. And they have been for the longest time. And how odd it is for this sheriff, as his resources are dwindling. He mentions they're having to release prisoners from the jail, and mentioning that they're going to move the scarce resources they have now into going after marijuana offenders. So you've already got scarce resources, which means it's already tough enough for you to catch the real criminals that are still out there. And yet you're going to take those scarce resources and go after the marijuana growers instead of the violent criminals. Do you realize in this country for the past about 10 or 15 years, there have been more arrests for marijuana than for all violent crimes combined in the United States? Don't take my word for it. Go look it up. It's the FBI's Uniform Crime Report. Pick any year that starts with a 2000, and you will find that the numbers for the arrests of marijuana are greater than the numbers of the arrests for violent crime. And in most cases, the arrests for marijuana possession alone, not sales, not trafficking, not cultivation, possession alone arrests outstrip arrests for violent crime. And yet we continue with this federal system of prohibition that incentivizes our local police departments to go after gardeners rather than to go after violent criminals. It's a shame and it's an abomination, and it needs to end now. Thank you so much, Carrie, for the news. And when we come back to the show, we'll be back with our Irie Wednesday Daily Toker Tunes. But I got some time here to talk a little bit about our good friend Ganja John. For those of you who are joining us a little bit later in the podcast, Ganja John had his operation yesterday. Today. This early morning, and they had his left eye removed. His left eye is blind. It was giving him severe pain. The eye has been removed. He is now going to be getting a prosthetic eye, so he should be back to the show as soon as possible. He'll probably be gone this week. We'll see what happens for the rest of the weeks out there. Also want to encourage people to get ready for the NORML National Conference taking place in Portland, Oregon, September 9th through the 11th. This will be at the Governor's Hotel. Now, the Governor's Hotel has sold out. We've already sold out of the Governor's, but we are directing overflow now to the Red Lion. And the nice situation is downtown in Portland, where we're going to be at, both of those hotels are directly on the MAX line. The MAX is our local light rail system. And within the downtown, there is a zone where all rides on the train are free. And both hotels are within that zone. So if you stay at the Red Lion, you can easily get to the conference, and vice versa. We can get back and forth to the Red Lion. We will also be having all sorts of special events, including the NORML fundraiser, which will probably be going on Friday night, perhaps on the rooftop of one of those Red Lions. We're still negotiating for that. And we're going to have a special party just for the listeners of NORML Show Live right here at NORML Show Live headquarters in our studio. It's absolutely free to anyone who comes out for the conference who is a fan of NORML Show Live. Send me an email at stash@normal.org if you plan on attending, so that I can kind of get a list of, who's going to be here and how much munchies and stuff I need to get a hold of. But I just wanted to do it as a thank you to all of you who helped make this show the greatest job on the planet. We really, really love it. And to all the volunteers out there that help us out, if you can be here, great. We would love to have you here as well. The NORML National Conference is going to be a lot of fun, September 9th through 11th, and we don't have the website up yet, but we should be launching it by the end of this week. So sometime on the show this week, I'll be getting you the contact so that you can get out there and get your registration taken care of. Also, want to encourage people, as you're registering for NORML National Conference, to take a look at some of the other hotels in the area. As long as you're close to that MAX line, go ahead and get a hotel there. You don't have to stay at the nice downtown hotels. If you want to stay a little bit out of town and, save a few bucks, as long as you're close to that MAX line, that train line, it's going to be real easy to get to the conference. If you want the map of the MAX line, just go to trimet.org, TRIMET.org, trimet.org. Now, we've got all sorts of great stuff happening at the conference, including New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson is pretty much confirmed now to be our headline speaker. We'll have all sorts of panels and information on activism and how to get involved. Saturday is a medical cannabis only day, and you can register just for Saturday if you prefer, or you can register for all 3 days. It's completely up to you how you want to register for the conference. And again, we'll have that website up by the end of the week to let you know more about that. Another benefit of coming out to the conference is that you will be able to partake in the Portland Hemp Stock, which is taking place out at Kelly Point Park at the confluence of the Columbia and Willamette Rivers. Nice, secluded park where you can really enjoy the music and all the vendors and all the fun that you'll have at this festival, the largest hemp festival in the state of Oregon. It is kind of the closing of the whole hemp festival season in the Pacific Northwest. This is the 5th or 6th Hemp Stock. I forget which one, and they're all always a lot of fun. So you can make it for all 4 days, the 9th through the 12th, because hemp stock is on the Saturday and Sunday, the 11th and 12th, where NORML conference is 9th, 10th, 11th, which is the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I hope to see y'all here. Hope to have a lot of people here for the party. It is going to be a ton of fun. We're really looking forward to it. All right, time to take a break and get our little Irie on. For those of you on the East Coast, happy 420. We'll be right back with Johnny Reaverseed and your Daily Toker tune.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would say to South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Law420.com. Hello, I'm Russ Belville, Outreach Coordinator for NORML. In my job, I read literally hundreds of headlines each month involving nonviolent, productive citizens whose lives are ripped apart by a marijuana or drug arrest. Many citizens could avoid arrest by refusing police searches and remaining silent, but police are well trained to confuse and intimidate. That's why you have a right to speak to an attorney before answering any police questions. I hope you never need to exercise that right, but if you do, make your first call to the law offices of John C. Lucy IV. John Lucy is an accomplished criminal defense attorney with expertise in Oregon's medical marijuana law. John Lucy understands and respects cannabis and drug consumers of all backgrounds. Call John C. Lucy IV at 503-227-6000 or visit in downtown Portland. Address available at law420.com. That's John C. Lucy IV at 503-227-6000 or visit law420.com today.
High as a kite, everybody!
This drug in front of me is what they call marijuana.
If we had a dime for every dime bag bought in America, marijuana would be legal by now. Donate to NORML at NORML.org and support NORML Show Live.
I'm going to light.
Roll a big fatty.
It's time for your Daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420-friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Our pod-safe music is donated by freedom-loving musicians who support our goal of ending adult marijuana prohibition. Today we get tunes for Irie Wednesday, our celebration of that mellow vibe we find in the best of reggae, ska, calypso, world, and Latin music. Brought to you by Johnny Reaverseed and the High Rollers in Des Moines, Iowa, America's favorite red-eyed soul rock and roll band, now available on iTunes and CD Baby. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@norml.org or mail your CD to NORML Outreach, 4110 Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, number 161, Portland, Oregon, 97214. Now, here's some great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes. Welcome back, everyone. 23 after the hour, and it seems like forever since we've made our trek to the internationally renowned home of reggae, the state of Iowa. And our good friend Johnny Reaverseed. Johnny, how you doing?
Jaman.
Jaman.
It has been a while, Russ. It's been a busy few weeks, so I hope you enjoyed your vacation.
I sure did. You got any new developments out there in the Midwest that we should know about since we were gone?
It's the same thing. The between the pharmacy board and the legislature is kind of, not wanting to take any responsibility, and it's an election year, so the lawmakers don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, I know how it is. We need to get people involved. Right, I've seen Rev Ray Green on the internet getting people pushed out for this, and I want to encourage everyone to check out IowaNormal.org as well if you all want to get involved. Now, Johnny brings us our Irie Wednesday tunes every Wednesday. So today, what do we have on tap?
We have kind of a funny band called The Fellows. I wasn't able to get any biographical information from them, but anyways, they consist of the members are Blase, Bourgeoisie, MC Tremendous, and MCT, and they say their main influences are Ancient Mobutu, Old Man Time, The Great British Weather, and Chingy. And although there isn't much biographical information available about the fellows, they tell me this, that the fellows are a group of chaps from the old school. They went to school together, a good school. Whilst at school, there was a younger pupil, the Silver Gnome, whom they mistreated for being silver. After school, they lost touch and went about their lives, all excelling in their various fields. Life on Earth during this time became tense. People grew weary and began abusing one another. As a result, search parties were sent out across the universe for a better life. And at the very same time, it so happened this Victa were doing the very same thing. And what ensued then was a galactic tug of war, and help was sent for. I guess only a stoner could come up with something like that. Anyways, you can read more about the rest of the fellows' intergalactic battles with gangster Buddhists and such at myspace.com/thefellowswhocutthe. And that's spelled just like it sounds, the fellows who cut the hay. And you can also check out, they've got a really interesting website with a little game you can play on it called, that's at www.thefellowswhocuttthehay.com. So here we go. This is their toker tune called On Trial for Smuggling Below Average Weed in Jamaica. That is a sin.
All right, this is the Fellows with liner notes that sound like something out of a George Clinton fantasy. Thanks so much, Johnny Reaper Seed. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Judge 12 presides. Slowly place your hand on my Bible while you take your vote. Before I pass out the sentence, do not 10p. Tell me how you please.
I'm donut, so do not do that. Everybody now hold on to that. Ever since school, everyone knew I was fucking the nuts. Dressed to kill with the devilish good looks. You could say I was the original renter dreadlocks. I even got sticky with the girl of 15. The girl was named Nikki. You could say she was a sex fiend. And these three scream, please choose me. But why choose? So I choose all three. That's me. You see, they're rubbing those butts. Those 3 and 15 are sucking on donuts nuts.
Objection! If it pleases your honor, I've got something to say. I went to the same school as Mr. Cavanway. I stand before the jury to back up Kerry's story. But if I did that, it would be perjury. Tell me, who do you think you are, Kerry? Do you really think it's cool to sound like R. Kelly? When he was 16, this fellow thought he was the Fonz, but he looked more like a zitty-faced Gestapo Ponce with a leather trench coat and purple sunglasses on and ginger dreadlocks that were 2 foot long. Wait. Did I say dreadlocks? They were more like simply redlocks. We could smell his head from at least 3 blocks. But enough about donut, let's move on to me. I was a middle school Mac Daddy. I was pimping girls out at a shilling a shout. And that's the story of why they call me 10P.
Order, settle yourself in my court. Oh dear, you bring bushweed in a me airport. You see the jury, yeah? All of them a make note. This are not Britain, no. This a true Jamaican court. Then you have the audacity to call yourself a fella. Well, welcome to our time, yeah? Welcome to the ghetto. Trial and tourist deported body get sent back as cargo. No sun tan, no sun black. Me fling you deep with the D-block. Inside this wall, no headrest, no bed, no pillow. There ain't no A to cut here with these, you're the fellow. You and your look alike, me say it must be your brother. Rent a dread, me give you 2 extra ears in your cellar. 10 pence, 10p, well you're 5p to me. I sentence you both, yeah, to the 3rd degree. You should be thankful, grateful unto me. At least within your cell you smoke some high-grade weed. Welcome to Jamaica, the land where they make you or break you. Well, I'm Judge 12, trying the case, find the both of them guilty. No one gonna jail ya, not even the Queen can bail ya. Remember I tell ya, welcome to Jamaica.
Loving the Irie Wednesday music. That's the Fellows with their song On Trial for our Irie Wednesday. Thanks to Johnny Reaperseed for bringing that to our attention. You can get the download from our blog at stash.normal.org. We'll have that posted later on today, along with all the other great downloads from our Daily Toker Tunes. Just check out the main menu, look under Media, and then Tunes, and you'll find the downloads for all the songs we can bring to you. Thanks a lot, guys.
It only comes twice a day, but I don't care. It's 420 somewhere.
All right, it's time to check out our Normal Cannabis Community Calendar, which you can find at normal.org/calendar. Today, Wednesday, July 14th, Cincinnati Fountain Square's Reggae Night. Hey, Irie Wednesday, Reggae Night at 5th and Vine in Cincinnati. Enjoy reggae music from 7 to 9 at Fountain Square. They'll be playing the Weeds card game and having an informal meeting with everyone for Miami Valley NORML, the Cincinnati area NORML chapter. For more information, send an email to info@mvnormal.org. In Michigan, the Grand Traverse Compassion Connection meeting is happening at Grandview Parkway in Traverse City, Michigan. For information, check out gtcompassionconnection.org. And there's an executive committee meeting for Madison NORML at the Dane County Board for the medical marijuana referendum. Check that out in Madison, Wisconsin. On Thursday, July 15th, Schoolcraft County NORML in Manistee, Michigan will be having their meeting at Hypnotic Hydroponics. It's their monthly chapter meeting. Check them out to get involved with NORML in Michigan. Also on Thursday, Philly NORML's having their open meeting at the A Space, 4722 Baltimore Avenue in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They always meet on the first and third Thursdays of the month. For more information, check out phillynormal.org. And for all the information on our events happening at NORML chapters and other events of interest to the cannabis community, check out the NORML Cannabis Community Calendar at norml.org/calendar. Normal Show Live reminds you to never consent to a search. If you're holding and you consent, in most states you will be arrested immediately and you will go to jail. If you don't consent to a search, police may try to intimidate you by threatening to bring in drug-sniffing dogs or try to fool you by saying things will go easier if you consent. Yeah, easier for them, sure. Stand your ground, refuse the search, and ask the officer if you're free to go. If they still detain you and eventually find your contraband, you'll be no more busted than if you had allowed the search. But by refusing the search, your attorney has a chance to win your acquittal before a judge. If you consent to the search, your attorney's hands are tied. You can find a list of NORML Legal Committee attorneys specializing in marijuana cases by visiting the Find a Lawyer link at normal.org.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
It's time for NORML Show Live's Cannabis Science with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is an associate professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany. Now, open wide and say, ah. Here's your dose of cannabis science.
It's been so long, but it's so good to be back on the phone with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Mitch, welcome back to the show.
Pleasure to be back, and glad you got some time off, but it's great to hear your voice again.
They forced me, Dr. Mitch. They forced me to take time off, by God. All right. Well, as we know, folks, this is our Cannabis Science segment, and this means we answer your live questions from our chat room. So log into the chat room, create yourself an account on Stick'em, and when you put your question in the chat, preface it in capital letters with the word question. Makes it easier for Cannabis Carry to find it and bring it up for us. Before we get to the live questions, I did want to talk to Dr. Mitch about one study that came out while we were out on vacation, and it had to do, I believe it was a study of regular cannabis users, chronic cannabis users, people with lots of experience, and how smoking or vaporizing cannabis affected their cognitive abilities. Do you have the details on that study, Doctor?
The bottom line on this and all of them now, Russ, is that there's really nothing to be found here when people who are regular cannabis users haven't recently used. So if you go into the lab and you're not high at the time, you're going to do fine on these memory tests. A big meta-analysis that came out before this study found little bitty effects if you collapse across a whole bunch of studies, but only in two areas, learning and forgetting. These guys concentrated on those domains and couldn't find any significant effects. I got out my handy statistical geek calculator and figured out that basically from now on, unless somebody's willing to test 550 cannabis users and 550 non-users, there's really no way they're going to find a significant difference between the groups. This doesn't mean there aren't memory deficits during the intoxication phase. Nobody encodes quite as well high as they do when they're not, despite what some of our friends may say. But the clear message here is that without intoxication, there really aren't any memory deficits that are appreciable in anybody who started using as an adult.
So if you're trying to learn something new, it might not be the time to fire up the bowl, but otherwise the use of cannabis doesn't seem to cause any long-term deficits for the regular user.
That's pretty much the bottom line here and in a whole bunch of other studies that have been published up till now.
All right. Well, let's get to the live Q&A here from our chat room. Destruction has a question. Wants to know, even though we know the research exists about the medical benefits of cannabis, wouldn't you say that is just a loophole in which recreational users of cannabis are managing to get a hold of it in the medical states?
In truth, I feel like these are still separate issues. I know a lot of folks have cried red herring whenever we talk about medical cannabis. But the sickest of the sick need this medicine, and they need it right away. And their use is really essential. I gotta admit that recreational users can certainly go days and days without it and not have a rough time. Medical users are in a completely different boat. This can be a matter of life and death for folks with some of the more serious conditions, and I don't want to pretend that medical users are somehow captive because of bad attitudes around recreational use. So it really is a separate condition, really is a separate issue, and I want to make sure that people understand that medical users need this plant.
You know, we got that attitude in a story from yesterday's show where this guy who was against the notion of medical marijuana, I forget which state it was we were talking about, but he basically said that, yeah, sure, it might help some cancer patients, it might help some AIDS patients, but it's not worth it if that means all these other people can fake chronic pain in order to so-called abuse marijuana, which just blows my mind to think that you'd want anyone to suffer because somebody might get high. That seems to be the attitude out there. Do you see that?
I was on Science Friday on NPR a couple weeks ago and had that same question come up. And in truth, this isn't, important. We know even recreational users don't suffer the negative consequences that everybody's been ranting and raving about. So fine. Oh, God forbid a recreational user sneaks in and gets an approval. Big deal. We want to have no one ever go to jail for owning a plant.
Yeah. And to think, when they keep bringing up that word abuse, I keep reminding them that what they're talking about as abuse is someone who used to be under the radar, used to never interface with anybody for their marijuana use, now going to see a doctor, getting a medical review, and following the laws of a state. That's abuse. It's a crazy situation every time we deal with this medical marijuana issue. Let's go on to another question here. I want to get as many in as possible. Zinedine is asking, as a doctor, what is your opinion on the prevalence of misinformation on the effects of cannabis on the body? And I guess a follow-up would be, why does it persist, this misinformation?
The clincher on this is we've been misinformed for so long, it's hard to change the story. So I feel like the prevalence of misinformation is in part left over from when guys our age were in junior high. Folks didn't really know the literature very well. They had a few isolated cases or misunderstood findings and ranted and raved about those in, what was the early versions of the DARE program. And now everybody sort of took that as gospel and isn't paying attention to the new information. The clincher here for me is start teaching them young. My kids are learning about cannabis at 9 and 6. You know, we've got to start spreading the word that this is not the drug that leads to hard drugs. This is not a plant that creates violence or leads to amotivational syndrome or some other crazy made-up stuff. And if we start with the generation who hasn't already heard all the propaganda, that's where my hope is.
Yes, absolutely. King Stoner has a question. He wants to know, how does marijuana use affect cardiomyopathy?
I got an email about this recently, and I'm still doing the research. So far, there really isn't a lot published. Generally, any cardiac symptoms can be, ill-advised for cannabis use because cannabis tends to increase heart rate. Cardiomyopathy is not one that's particularly sensitive to increases in heart rate, but it's something that you'd have to really clear with a physician or somebody who understands that particular disorder. I'm going to look into that more, and we can talk about it again next week.
Okay. Question from Datrabor, and this is about back pain, apparently a problem with ruptured discs in the back, and sciatic nerve pain. This person's mentioning that they've got Oxy, and I don't know if that's OxyContin or oxycodone. It says it helps deal with, but doesn't take away the pain. Is that the way cannabis works? Does cannabis take away the pain, back pain, sciatic nerve pain, or does it just make you high enough that you don't care?
The clincher seems to be that it's you're ambivalent about pain is part of the way that the pain is alleviated, but it's an inverted U, if you will. If you have not enough or too much, it can make the pain worse. It's finding that exact dose, and that's why Marinol, for example, is no good for this kind of thing, but a vapor that you can titrate yourself can be ideal. Hydrocodone, the OxyContin, oxycodone, these opiate drugs are really tough because you develop tolerance quickly. So in a couple of days, the dose that was working no longer works anymore. If you can use cannabis as an adjunct to that, or even without that, you discover the dose. Usually the analgesic effects, the pain-killing effects, don't develop tolerance as quickly, and people can, really do a whole lot better with fewer side effects than these strong opiate drugs that they're getting from the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, I've heard that echoed in so many medical marijuana patients I talk to who've been able to drastically reduce their opioid pain medications through using medical cannabis as an adjunct therapy. If you'd like more information on that and you want to get more in detail about that, I want to encourage people, the email address for Dr. Mitch is 420research@gmail.com, 420research@gmail.com if you want to get more detailed about that kind of stuff. Let's move on to a couple more questions here. Arctic Bob wants to know about medical cannabis and scleroderma, which I have no idea what that is. Scleroderma. Does it help at all?
This is another one where we just don't have the publications. I've had 2 people email me saying that it does help them with some of these symptoms, but the clincher is we just don't have anything published. It's sad because this is another situation where it may be that the strain that you can get from the government isn't the strain that would be most helpful for this disorder, and so it's going to be a while before we have a lot of data. But given this plant's wonderful safety history, why not give it a try and see what happens?
What exactly is scleroderma? Sounds like a skin thing, derma.
I was going to say it's kind of one of these autoimmune things where basically your own antibodies are working against you. A lot of the treatments can be, fatiguing or upsetting or just not great. A lot of people have been ranting and raving saying, well, cannabis will just mess up your immune system more, but in fact the data show that that's really not the case. And it's got some of the same symptoms that you see like in Raynaud's or things like that, where basically on the extremities you're experiencing pain or kind of loss of feeling, and then you do have these large areas of the skin where you can just sort of see these splotches, and it does progress rather rapidly.
Okay. I'd love to have more information on that. If anybody out there has those kind of conditions and have been using cannabis, please just let us know. Send me a link at stash@normal.org, Dr. Mitch's 420 research at Gmail. It is something that needs to be taken a look at for sure. Now, White Talon comes around with a question that I'm sure a lot of people have some experience with out there in the cannabis community. I know I did growing up in Idaho. What is left in the resin that we scrape from our bowls? Why does that resin get us high? And what are the effects on our health from smoking resin?
My very first High Times column, I addressed this and got a ton of hate mail about it. But in truth, if you're actually igniting the plant, if you're lighting it on fire, the THC is going to be burned up. So what's left in the resin is unlikely to be psychoactive THC. Immediately people say, oh, dude, I got so high on it, though. You've got to understand. Odds are high either there's something really nasty in there that's psychoactive that we just don't understand, that you're just holding your breath so long for each hit that you end up making yourself high that way, or there's a little bit of basically unburnt material back in there, and that's what's psychoactive. But I really do not recommend this, in part because this is essentially something that's already been carbonized, already been burned, and odds are high you're holding the fire there a long time and inhaling a lot of heat, and the lungs just didn't evolve to handle hot air like that.
Okay, so stay away from the resin if you can avoid it. Let's get to this question here, and a couple of people have asked this in two different ways. I'm going to try to combine these questions together. Will smoking cannabis affect diabetes and blood sugar levels aside from getting the munchies and eating Twinkies?
The key on this, in part because of the munchies, everybody thought, oh, it must be decreasing blood sugar, and that's what makes you have the munchies. It turns out that's not the case at all. The CB1 receptor just increases hunger in, single-cell animals and everything. I mean, people may experience it differently, but, if a single-cell organism is doing this, it's obviously not a blood sugar issue in the same way. The problem often, though, is a lot of folks who experience, the first parts of insulin shock or weird symptoms of diabetic coma don't know how to distinguish that from the subjective effects of cannabis. And so the key is if you're, basically a diabetic and monitoring your blood sugar, make sure you're monitoring regularly. Cannabis won't be a particularly good treatment. It shouldn't be at low doses particularly harmful, but it's not something that's going to help out. If it does lead you to go eat a bunch of Twinkies, obviously you're going to have all this insulin release, and it's going to be a real drag. So by all means, smoke what you want, but don't eat everything you want.
Okay. Lively Libra has a question here. Does the long-term daily use of cannabis help or cause depression?
So it looks like we've got animal data, some data from my lab, and some data from some other labs saying either nothing at all or modest improvement in depression with cannabis, particularly THC and a couple of the other cannabinoids, but cannabidiol and some of the other ones don't do anything. It's not my treatment of choice as far as clinical depression is concerned. There's some great books out on cognitive behavior therapy now. David Burns' Feeling Good is the one I recommend most often. Often it's as simple as going out and making sure you're doing fun stuff every day, getting exercise, eating right, getting plenty of sleep, and those do a whole lot better. But in the long term, this would not be my treatment of choice, but it shouldn't be something that facilitates depression. That big meta-analysis that everybody made a big deal out of with schizophrenia also looked at depression and showed there's no longitudinal data supporting the idea that cannabis causes depression.
Okay. And we have time for one more question here. Let me remind everyone the email address for Dr. Mitch Earleywine is 420research@gmail.com. 420research@gmail.com. Our last question gets a little detailed here. This is an interesting question from TSIN76. How much of the benefit of medical marijuana is cannabinoids, and how much is the terpenes? Since the effectiveness seems to be strain dependent, it would suggest that the terpenes have a lot to do with it. Are there any studies that look at that?
So both the terpenes and the flavonoids, these other little molecules in cannabis, seem to have a lot of potential for particularly issues with pain and the way our cells age. So I don't want to minimize their impact, but they have not been studied anywhere near as extensively as the cannabinoids. We do see pretty positive stuff for sleep from both cannabidiol and THC, independent of the terpenes. But psychoactive terpenes are a neat idea and a relatively new area, and I'm optimistic that we're going to see some neat research about that.
Oh, I am optimistic too. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Earlywine. And the folks in the chat room are complaining that your day goes by too fast when we get you on. They want you for a whole hour.
Well, we'll have to work one out where there's a Dr. Mitch Marathon.
The Dr.
All
Mitch
right.
Marathon. I love it. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, Dr. Mitch.
Talk to you later.
All right, 50 after the hour. When we come back from break, a little radical ranting on dispensary owners who are against legalization of marijuana in California. This is NORML Show Live. It's tough talking to kids about marijuana, especially if you might be a parent who dabbled a time or two in your youth. So to help you out, get your copy of Dr. Mitch Earlywine's latest book, A Parent's Guide to Marijuana. Dr. Earlywine is an associate professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and an expert on the studies concerning marijuana, its effect on health and society, and the methodology behind the statistics. He is a frequent guest here on our daily audio stash. Dr. Earlywine lays it all out without the propaganda and scare tactics that parents know won't work with teenagers. He presents a rational understanding of cannabis, what it is and what it isn't, and why kids shouldn't be using marijuana. You can order today through Amazon.com or check our links at our blog, stash.normal.org.
You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 52 after the hour. I got to take some time to promote my latest piece on the blog Huffington Post. That's HuffingtonPost.com. Look under HuffingtonPost.com/Russ-Belville. Only 3 L's in Belleville. My latest post here is called I Got's Mine, Dispensary Owners Against Marijuana Legalization. Now, as you know, yesterday we interviewed Dale Sky Clare, who's a spokesperson for Prop 19, the initiative to legalize cannabis in California. And we talked about some survey data, a Survey USA poll that showed the support being 50% support for and 40% against. And we dug through the demos. We found, if you're older and more conservative, you're more likely to oppose the measure. If you're young and live in the Bay Area, you're more likely to support it. But we didn't talk about one part of that demographic that I wanted to talk about, and I'll cover in today's rant, and that is this rapidly emerging demographic of dispensary owners and the people that listen to them who are against Proposition 19. Now, I've been covering this on the Stash blog at stash.normal.org. I told the story of a Sacramento dispensary owner who's even shelling out his own money that he made by selling marijuana to help keep it illegal. We've been talking about this. And just today on the Huffington Post, there was a fellow by the name of Paul Jury who posted a post called Legalize It, Ask a Guy Who Runs a Medical Marijuana Dispensary. And we just checked this out, and this is Craig. This is a quote here from Craig, the dispensary owner on Venice Beach who was interviewed in the piece, who says why he's opposed to Prop 19. I'll give you 2 reasons, Craig said. One is big tobacco. Did you know that Philip Morris just bought 400 acres of land up in Northern California? The minute marijuana becomes legal, they'll mass produce and flood the market. And, of course, they'll add the same toxins they put in regular cigarettes to get you addicted, and very little THC, so you'll have to buy more. In short, they're going to ruin weed. He gestured around at his beloved shop with every flavor of every strain in its purest form, selling at cost prices, and said, quote, I like the way things are now, end quote. Yeah. You remember how alcohol prohibition ended in the 1930s? And, well, probably not, but just work with me on this one. You remember how alcohol prohibition ended in the 1930s and Anheuser, Busch, Coors, and Miller flooded the market with 3-2 beer and ruined alcohol? Wouldn't it be nice if we could go to shops with every flavor of every microbrew in its purest form and... Oh, wait a minute. I live in Portland, Oregon, the microbrew capital of the world. That's what we have now. Legalization of alcohol didn't ruin alcohol. It made alcohol better. It made it so the alcohol was pure and regulated and that IDs would be checked before people could get it. And now we've got more flavors of beer, more varieties of wine, more types of liquor than you could shake a stick at. Legalizing marijuana is going to do the same thing. It's going to open up the possibilities of everything from your low-grade swag all the way to your hand-trimmed, finest, organic, purple, blueberry kush, OG buds, whatever you want to call them. It's going to get better. We have what we want by legalization, unless, of course, you run a dispensary. See, this Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds, toxic, addictive, highless marijuana market flood theory has been floating around the cannabis community like a stale hit of swag for decades now. It's a kind of conspiracy thinking, really. It's the same kind of thinking that leads people to believe you could hide 40,000 pounds of explosives in the World Trade Center without anyone noticing, or you could get an entire soundstage crew to keep quiet about the faked moon landings for 4 decades, right? It's idiotic conspiracy thinking, and here's why. Number one, Prop 19 allows you to grow your own. If Philip Morris wants to come in and make some swaggity swag and put toxic stuff in it, who's going to buy it? Not the people that are growing their own, and not their friends who are going to get it from their friends who are growing their own. No. You got to have a market for it before they can sell it. And Prop 19 can allow cities to consider sales, right? So if you're the kind of guy who wants to make a living growing and selling marijuana, wouldn't you want your big corporate competition to have lousy product? Lousy product that doesn't get anyone high? That would be the number one thing you'd want. Hey, come buy my hand-trimmed, non-keefed, organic, high-potency bud, right? It'd be like microbrews are today. The small producer can grow a connoisseur product. Furthermore, Prop 19 allows cities to regulate production so they can dictate what it is, and who's adding stuff to it, what's being added to it, how much is produced, who's producing it, where they're producing it. It's not like Philip Morris can just start putting all sorts of chemicals into weed. If we decide to allow people to produce it and sell it, we can come up with the laws that prevent them from doing that. And the final thing about Prop 19, it doesn't make Prop 215 go away. It doesn't make the dispensaries go away. You still want to go get your doctor's recommendation so you can grow 20 plants in your backyard and buy 1.5 pounds at the dispensary. That will still exist. So who's buying this toxic, highless, addictive Philip Morris swaggity swag? Not the people who are shopping in the dispensaries now. You think they're going to go from having the best marijuana on the planet to buying the swaggity swag from Philip Morris? Come on now. Look, if you really want to look at what's going on here, you just have to look back to that alcohol prohibition and ask yourself how excited Al Capone would have been reading the headlines trumpeting the imminent repeal of alcohol prohibition. It's not a perfect analogy because Capone was a murderous criminal thug and dispensaries owners, by and large, are law-abiding, peaceful business people. And yes, dispensary owners do help out people with cancer and AIDS and glaucoma and all these terrible debilitating diseases, and oftentimes they'll help them out for free. Although you could point out that Al Capone and his gang used to give away turkeys for free on Thanksgiving too, so there's that. But the main point I'm trying to make here is that both Al Capone and a dispensary owner are business people dealing in a prohibited product. A prohibited product that will become much cheaper and open up to much more competition if it were to be legalized by Prop 19. This is about dispensary owners protecting their bottom line and not wanting to fight against a real market. I got's mine, and everybody else can just go to jail. I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back tomorrow with more news, interviews that you can use for the cannabis community and for Cannabis Carry and Ganja Gone. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.